For this lesson, you're going to learn how to talk about art. Make sure you're taking notes on the art analysis notes page. It also explains what your essay will be, and this will actually tie into your very first project. So here we go. So just to kind of think first, just a little bit more of a basic level, not thinking directly about art, but thinking just about shoes. So like, what is the point of high-heeled shoes? When you're looking at shoes, you automatically think of things that are common to you. So like, who wears them, why they wear them. So traditionally we might think of women wearing high-heeled shoes, or we might think of where women would wear high-heeled shoes, so maybe to a wedding, to some type of special occasion, maybe an interview. How does she feel when she's wearing those shoes? She might feel a little taller, she might feel more confident, she might feel more feminine. But high-heeled shoes weren't always just for women. They had an original use for them. So what is that use? And kind of breaking down what was the original purpose, and then how has that purpose actually changed over time and adapted for different social scenarios. So for instance, some of the very first people who wore high-heeled shoes were actually men. The first shoes that were worn with heels on them were actually Persian cavalry riders. When they would ride into battle, they needed some way for their shoes not to slide through the stirrups while they were trying to, throw swords around, whipping people in the face, all that fun jazz. But in this case, eventually it was added as a fashion statement. So people in like the French aristocracy, for instance, King Louis here, he was actually wearing them as a fashion statement to show his class and his status. And eventually, women would wear them. After a while, no one was wearing them. And then they came back, and as we think of high-heeled shoes today, the 20th century, they started as a low heel, and men still have low heels on, say, cowboy boots, motorcycle riding boots, anything of that nature. But women's heels started getting a little taller. We now think of high-heeled shoes as like Marilyn Monroe with the stilettos. So how does this connect to actually talking about art? So you use your background information to help you understand things a little bit better. So you're going to learn how you're going to talk about artwork, how to be able to use artistic language effectively to discuss artwork, whether you're discussing professionals, your own, or your peers in class, or looking at other artwork maybe out in your world if you go to a museum, gallery, or if you're looking to purchase something for your home. Aesthetics. So these are going to be the first words that you're going to take notes on your note-taking sheet. What are aesthetics? Aesthetics essentially are the philosophy or study of the nature and value of art. So there's lots of different people out there that think about what is the proper aesthetics, and this has changed over time due to the fact of technology and invention, and just generally people evolve as a group. So whether some type of social constructs are looking for certain types of advertisement, or they're trying to communicate big ideas, but there's always kind of this general idea of what is considered good art. And initially, for instance, Van Gogh was rejected, but now he's considered one of the most famous artists, painters, in all that there are for painters in the world. Art criticism. When we first think of criticism, we probably get a negative reaction, but criticism is actually a positive thing. So art criticism is the act of or art of analyzing and evaluating or judging the quality of work. So if you want to think of this as like a job, or if you're in class, you're getting criticized, you're getting analyzed on how well you're doing in your job, whether you are really good customer service, or you're opening lots of credit cards for maybe if you work at Herberger's, or you're getting really good sales for your company, whatever that might be. You might have a review cycle, and during that review cycle you'll actually find out if you get a raise if you're doing your job well, and if there's anything that you could work on so that way you can get paid more later on. As an artist, though, you want to use that criticism in a way that you can actually improve your artistic skill, so you feel more confident as an artist, and in some cases, if you are a professional artist, so you can make more money because it's going to draw more attention to a wider range of people. Aesthetic experience. Every person is their own individual and has their own background and interaction with any type of thing that is in front of their face. So when they're looking at artwork, there might be a person on the left who's really, really intrigued and finds a piece absolutely beautiful, where the person on the right, they might see something that doesn't really rub them correctly, and that just makes them uncomfortable. So that could be a variety of reasons. For instance, when I was in college, I really liked wearing maroon because that was part of my school colors. I was very proud of them. but I was working with a young woman at the time that the color maroon very bothered her. For reasons are because she eventually told me when we got to know each other a little bit more, is that reminded her of being physically abused as a child. And that was very upsetting for her to see that color. So for me, it was a sign of pride to have that color. For her, that was a very negative memory that brought to light for her. So everybody's aesthetic experience is going to be different with every work of art. When you talk about art, you want to have two different types of statements. There's objective statements and there's subjective statements. Objective statements are not influenced by any personal bias, they're just facts. So if you're talking about there are wavy lines around the belly of a piece, or maybe there are contrasting colors of violet and yellow, those would be very objective. So the person next to you might agree, yep, I can see that. That's very much there. Just like a police officer, when they're interviewing you of something that would have happened, they want to know exactly what happened, especially if someone got hurt. Or a scientist might go step by step and be very objective with what they're doing, so that way someone else could look at it and know that there wasn't any personal bias inflicted on that procedure that they're doing. Whereas subjective statements are statements that are influenced by personal thoughts or interpretations. So you'll notice that it says steps 1, 2, and then 3 and 4. So that refers to the different steps that you go through while you're looking at a piece of artwork, so that way you're not skipping anything. So for instance, the first 2 steps are very objective, where the second steps, or the third and fourth steps, are actually very subjective. So these are things that could be, oh, that's so beautiful, I really like it, or yeah, it's a really nice piece, but I don't personally enjoy it. Those are very subjective. But in some cases, you might also be trying to deduce what is the piece actually used for, what is the meaning behind it. So those can also be subjective, but typically, kind of like if you want to support an argument that you're having with someone, you want to use those elements and principles that you see that were very objective to help support why you think that was used for that particular purpose. So like, I think this was a water vessel because why? What type of form did it have? Maybe it had a handle and a spout, so it makes you think if you'd be able to pour out of that particular vessel. So the very first thing that you want to do when looking at artwork, initially you get your gut reaction of I like it or I don't like it, but try to avoid that for right now. Step 1, you just want to focus on description. These are very objective types of statements. Don't just list, don't just say, yeah, I see a line and shape. Like, try to use adjectives. So there are wavy lines, there are geometric shapes that wrap around this form or are decorating the background of this particular painting. Okay, so those are more objective type of statements. But first of all, establish, well, what is it made of? What is this thing that you are looking at? Is it a ceramic piece? Is it a painting? Is it a bronze sculpture? Whatever that might be. Okay, and then what do you see in the composition? How is it organized? So using your art elements, using your principles of art and design to help establish what it is. And the easiest way to kind of think about this is if you were talking to your best friend and you wanted to explain to them what this really awesome piece looked like, but you couldn't take a picture of it and send it to them, you had to just explain it. So you want them to be able to picture it in their head. So if you just say that there's a bunch of elements and you just say it's a vase, there's lots of different types of vase forms out there, and okay, there's lines on it, but what kind of lines are there? Are they straight? Are they parallel? Are they wavy? Does it create some type of texture when they're crisscrossing over each other? You want to describe it as well as you can. Analysis kind of ties into the description. So where are these things? Are there patterns? So yeah, there's shapes on it, but are there an alternating pattern that wraps around the neck? Maybe there is contrast between the background and the foreground. So just using those principles to really help understand how those elements are organized. Interpretation. So now that you've looked at this thing, you start to investigate what's actually there. You can start creating some guesses or hypotheses of actually what this was used for, or what was its purpose. Was it telling a story? So is there a meaning or a tone? Tone refers to how you feel about it, not necessarily whether you like it, but like, does it evoke like happy thoughts because of bright colors? Is it very dark because of the use of dark colors? Or maybe there's some type of imagery on there that seems very disturbing. Okay? But again, it's using those things that you're reminded of or that you noticed in the description to really help make sure that those are what you think the piece was used for, or its purpose of why it's made. And then last but not least is the judgment. So the artistic merit, is this successful? Okay, so you might say, I don't particularly like this piece, but I do respect why it was made. I think it's really interesting form. It's not something that I would personally like to have, but it is a really, really cool way to create something. Or I could see this used here or there, whether that would be on the side of a building, it could be used as an advertisement. I could see why it was used 3,000 years ago as a water vessel, so you appreciate it, but you don't necessarily like it. Or you could just say it is an absolutely beautiful piece. It's wonderful. I think it's a really strong design, whatever that could be. So just your personal take on why you like it or why you don't like it, but you should be able to explain why. Alright, so it'd probably be useful to know what are the different parts of, say, a simple vase form. So just to give you a little idea here, think of it as kind of like a human body. So this area that's really, really wide, this is going to be referred to as the belly of your vessel form. So vessels are anything that you could potentially put inside from the top. The area going up into the skinny part, right here, that is the shoulder. The area that is at its skinniest point, that is the neck. The edge of this area at the opening is the rim. The opening itself is the mouth. And then all the way at the bottom here, this is the foot. And there are lots of different types of feet. This one is raised up a little bit. You could have feet that maybe have little spheres at the bottom, like so. You could have a more fancy one, like this Luke Sison TED Talk video that you watched in class, where it looks more like a tutu. There's lots of options. You're just kind of limited to your imagination, or it could just be flat. It's just up to you. But there is a certain lightness you get when you have that raised negative space between the base of the form and the bottom of the foot. So this would be a great piece. This is an ancient Chinese vessel from 6000 to 1000 BC, where you go through the steps and try to figure out, well, what does this thing look like? What does it remind you of? What kind of art elements are there? What textures are there? And then going into talking about, well, what do you think it was used for? Especially this being a really unique type of form with a tapered bottom. So you got to get creative of, okay, what do I know about Chinese culture? What are they known for agriculturally at that particular time period? What does their landscape look like that they would need to develop something like this form? And then finally, how do you feel about it? Because sometimes you might not initially like it, but then when you actually start investigating, you actually have a newfound appreciation for that particular form, and even maybe for the culture that you're looking into. So how is this going to connect? You will be writing a short essay. There's a World Pottery presentation in your Schoology, so you can go through, look for some images of something that you like. So you're going to do two things with that. First, you're going to write your own art analysis. It's probably going to be about half page to a page. Look at your objectives list in your packet from your notes, and then you're also going to be influenced by that piece to create your own artwork using the coil and a little bit of slab method. So maybe you like a Greek vessel and you want to create a Greek form, but you're going to decorate it a little bit different. Or maybe you really like the decoration from a piece from Iraq, but you want to have a bigger form, or maybe more like a vase, but you want to use the different patterns that were on that Iraqi form. All right, have fun.